Turn your Bibles to the 1 Samuel chapter 1. 1 Samuel chapter 1. And yes, we are still recording, and we are still put down on Facebook and YouTube. Okay. This morning we're going to look at Hannah. Hannah, I believe, is a woman who personifies ideal motherhood. In fact, when you look at Hannah, her name has the beautiful and attractive meaning of gracious or graciousness or favor. She was the favorite wife of Elkanah. And although he was a godly man, he still practiced polygamy back then. I still can never understand how in the world a man can have more than one wife. Okay? And I say this jokingly. For me, one wife is a handful anyway, okay? And I know the wives will say one husband is a handful for them. So there you go. But that was the practice back then. But also, too, in those days, it was the desire of every woman to have a child. I think you probably, if you've listened to all the videos on the mothers so far, you've heard me probably say that time after time. Many of the women wanted a girl thinking that it would be the mother of the Christ child. Many of the women wanted a boy, so that way it would carry on the name and the lineage of their husband. And so it was a burning desire for, especially Old Testament time, to have a boy. And yet, Hannah, though, was barren, but yet it's through her experience that I honestly feel that not only for mothers, but dads as well, that we can gain some spiritual insight and some helpful spiritual insight that helps us in our own lives as we prepare for parenthood. Because if I was asked for a show of hands, and I'm not, because I think I pretty well know the answer. If I was asked for a show of hands how many parents can honestly say they were ready for parenthood, they probably would not be a hand go up. Okay? We learn from experience. But one thing that we need to learn is that we need to always seek out the Lord. And we see this in Hannah. I'm going to ask that we stand in reverence to God as we read from God's holy word this morning. 1 Samuel chapter 1, beginning in verse 20. Scripture tells us, "So it came to pass in the process of time that Hannah conceived and bore a son, and called his name Samuel, saying, Because I have asked for him from the Lord. Now the man Elkanah and all of his house went up to offer to the Lord a yearly sacrifice and his vow. But Hannah did not go up, for she said to her husband, Not until the child is weaned, then I will take him, that he may appear before the Lord and remain there forever. So Elkanah, her husband, said to her, Do what seems best to you. Wait until you have weaned him. Only let the Lord establish his word. Then the woman stayed and nursed her son until she had weaned him. Now when she had weaned him, she took him up with her with 3 bulls, 1 ephah of flour, and a skin of wine, and brought him to the house of the Lord in Shiloh. And the child was young. And then they slaughtered a bull and brought the child to Eli. And she said, O my Lord, as your soul lives, my Lord, I am the woman who stood by you here praying to the Lord. For this child I prayed, and the Lord has granted me my petition, which I asked of him. Therefore I also have lent him to the Lord. As long as he lives, he shall be lent to the Lord. So they worshiped the Lord there." Shall we pray? Father God, Lord, this morning as we just look at the life of Hannah, and Lord, to see what we can learn from her, and Lord, can still apply to our lives today. Because, Father, I firmly believe what Hannah can teach us that we need to apply as far as parents today. That, Lord, we experience what Hannah experienced as well. And so, God, speak to our hearts through your holy word this morning. In the name of Jesus, I pray. Amen. You may be seated. As we go back to 1 Samuel at the beginning of chapter 1, we honestly begin to see what Hannah was like. We can see her sanctity. In other words, we can see the holiness of her life and her character. And for the record that we have, we can see that Hannah appears to have been a woman with an unblemished character. In other words, she was a woman that you could not find anything against. She was a woman that people looked up to, but yet in some eyes, in some individuals' eyes, probably the only blemish that Hannah would have was that she was childless. But yet, we notice one thing, and you'll probably hear me repeat this time after time. Regardless of Hannah's condition of being childless, Hannah never gave up on prayer. Despite what would go on in Hannah's life, Hannah never gave up on praying unto the Lord. She never gave up on crying unto the Lord. And all parents, that is so important that we always lift our children in prayer. Regardless how young or regardless how old they are, that we always continue to lift our children in prayer. I was in a conference one time, a discipleship conference, and there were several of us sitting there, and the lady was sitting there, and our instructor made a comment that we all basically disagreed with, and I'm not going to say what that comment was, but this woman all of a sudden spoke up, and she goes, "Young man," and I'm here to tell you that when a lady speaks up and says, "Young man," you better listen. I know from experience, okay? She goes, "Young man, let me tell you something about not only parenting, but about loving your spouse." And she began to share that how her and her spouse were married at the age of 13. Now, this was a lady who was 60 years old, married at the age of 13. His parents allowed them to stay with them. And in the midst over their marriage life, they end up with 8 children. And she goes, "Let me tell you something. The day that my first son was born, I prayed for him every day, morning and night. My husband and I would gather at the breakfast table before he would go to work, and we would pray for our children together. Throughout the day, I would pray for our children, especially as they began to grow, and as they would go to school, and I would pray for them and lift them up. And then before I'd go to bed, I would thank the Lord for my children. I saw all but one come to the saving knowledge of Jesus Christ before their 15th birthday. But I never gave up on the one, my oldest. She goes, I prayed day and night, night and day. And finally, on his 50th birthday, I saw my son walk the aisle, kneel at the altar, and declare Jesus as his Lord. And then she paused. And she goes, and I still pray for my children day and night. Pray for them day and night. She never quit praying. Yes, it was looked down upon her. She goes, we were the talk of the town when we got married at age 13. You know, oh, I was pregnant. You know, all these stories went about. But she goes, my husband and I loved each other. And she goes, yes, it was probably wrong, but we did it anyway. And she goes, that was the best decision I've ever made in my life. And I love all 8 of my children equally. But I never quit praying. Regardless what people said, I never quit praying. This was the way with Hannah. She never quit praying. Why? Because she feared God. She feared the Lord. But not only